Well, good morning, church. Welcome. We are glad that you're here. I don't know about you, but all that does is make me want coffee now every time I see it. Seriously, we just want to slow down for a moment before we get busy with where we're heading and the rest of service, and just say, you know what, I don't know if you hear this enough. I know it's something that we can never get tired of hearing, but you are unique and you are special, and you are not just another person in a room. That God sees you this morning, that this moment that we get to share together not only is special and unique because we're all here, but it's special and unique because God is here. And just slowing down and recognizing before we go another step further, before we dive in any deeper, whether you're here in the room right now and some of you are outside of the room listening and a part of it, that you just need to know that today God sees you, that whatever you brought in the room, that whatever you carry into this space, and if you're anything like me, and that means you're human, you carried something into this room. We don't live in a vacuum. And so the reality is we all walk in this space and we all carry whatever the week was. We all carry whatever relational things are going on. We all carry whatever weights. And maybe just, if I could encourage you and maybe just, if you'll give me the freedom to, the next hour is a gift to you. The next hour is a gift where you just get to be. We don't have any expectations of you. That if you're new to this space and you're like, man, I don't know about this church thing. I don't know about this whole, let me just help you. There's no expectation on you. Even God himself is smiling just because you're here. There's no weight that's being placed on you that you got to carry. If you can, push everything you carried into the room to the side and just be. And sometimes, I'm gonna be real honest with you, sometimes that being is you'll fall asleep. That's okay. That's okay, because if that's what your soul needs this morning, then that's what your soul needs. And we're okay with that. And I say that hopefully to just, we can all collectively breathe together that we get to enter this space, and we're just trusting that God will give us what we need today. That I don't enter this space as some kind of expert that's gonna help you, and you're like, well, why are you talking if you're not an expert? Okay, hang on. That I'm just admitting that I'm as broken as you are, and that I need God to show up as much as you do. And we're just gonna sit in that space together. You might be familiar with church, you might have been a bunch of times, and you might even be groaning on the inside because you're like, they did it again. The message is first. Or maybe it's just a really long welcome, you don't know. But seriously, that may be your reaction. And I just want to encourage you, something I'm noticing about us as humans. When you get in this space, sometimes, we're talking about hurry, and we'll get into that in a minute, but sometimes you rush into this space, and then the first thing you hear is a guitar or a drum, and you don't even, your heart rate doesn't even have a chance to catch up, and now there's this moment where I'm like, I gotta engage in worship, and okay, here's the beauty of this. You get to just sit back, and for the next 30 minutes, just listen. You don't gotta do nothing. And here's what I'm noticing that is really interesting to me. You guys, worship is a response. Worship is a response to what God has been doing. And by worship, I mean singing. Singing is a response. And I don't know about you, but I don't enter this room going, sometimes I drag into this room. Sometimes I bounce into this room. Sometimes it's been an amazing week and I'm ready. A lot of times, I'm just, we're busy dropping off kids. We're busy getting in this space. And now, I haven't even caught my breath. And you want me to respond to what? The fight I had in the car on the way here because it was so busy getting out of the house this morning. And so today, it is a disruption. We're doing it again. And it's a disruption because of the place we find ourselves with rhythm, sometimes disruptions are the best thing we can do because it makes us reorient and refocus on why we do certain things. And so today we're going to get to singing, and we're going to sing beautifully. Like today is just a beautiful day. But we're going to do it out of response of what God's already done in our souls. And so we're just trusting. We're going to spend some time at the table reminding us of who we are and why we are the way we are because of Jesus. We're going to remind ourselves that Jesus is the big deal, not anyone in this room. And we're just going to lean in. We are in a series called Rhythms. And if you've been here, you know we've been disrupting rhythms. We've been talking about this first 2 weeks as we're eliminating things from your life. And specifically, if you were here last week, we invited you to engage this past week, in some solitude, where you would just get your soul alone with God. That you would take intentional time within your day to just kind of anchor your soul back in. And hopefully that's been a blessing and a gift to you. And then also we talked about this concept of fasting, that I would give up what I want for what I really need. That I would give up these moments of what I'm craving, if you like, to really get what my soul actually needs. And today we're still in the phase of elimination. We're still in the phase of making space within our life. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but one of the key answers to how are you doing? Oh, I'm good, just busy. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you ask somebody in their 20s, someone in high school, someone in college, someone that has a family, doesn't have a family. It don't matter. It doesn't matter like what stage of life. You ask somebody how they're doing and they're like, oh, I'm good, just busy. And here's the thing. I don't know if you've noticed, but busy and present don't go together very well. What do I mean? How many times have you been home and you're physically there, but you're not present? That someone talks to you and they go, are you even listening to me? And men, you have that thing called selective hearing. I know. Might have a case of it myself. But reality is this, we struggle to be fully present. What do I mean? You ever notice when you go to coffee for someone, is your phone up or down? Is your phone in your pocket or is it on the table? If it's on the table, then up or down, because here's the thing. What you do with your phone says an awful lot about the person sitting across from you at that table. And here's what I mean. When your phone's up and your screen lights up, it does something to your body and actually releases chemicals to check what it is. And then you notice how many times, whether it be at home, whether it be at coffee with someone, whether it just be at dinner, you notice how many times whatever came up on your phone becomes, you tell the person what it is so that you then have permission to respond. And what you're actually saying is, this actually is more important than the person sitting in front of me. We live in a world where distraction is normal. We live in a world where things vie for our attention at any given moment. And this entire series is just about catching this rhythm, slowing down, stepping into and going, okay, can we live life the way we believe God intended it to live? What do we mean by that? We've been looking at Jesus as our model. We've been looking at Jesus as the person. Jesus is the person that it's God with skin on. And if we're going to look anything like God that we're called to, then Jesus is probably a pretty good person to mimic. So what were the habits of Jesus? And we looked last week specifically at a couple, but what were the habits of Jesus, and can we capture those rhythms and insert them to our lives? And so over the next several weeks, you've already experienced, hopefully, solitude and fasting. This week, we're going to dive into a brand new rhythm. But before we do, there's a quote that I came across, and I'm going to read it off my phone if you'll forgive me. But it's by Ronald Rolheiser, and it goes like this. So much of our unhappiness comes from comparing our lives, our friendships, our loves, our commitments, our duties, our bodies, our sexuality to some idealized and non-Christian vision of things which falsely assures us that there is a heaven on earth. When that happens, and it does, Our tension might be a great word for this series. Our tensions begin to drive us mad. In this case, to a cancerous restlessness. True restfulness, though, is a form of awareness, a way of being in life. Catch that, a way of being in life. It is living ordinary life with a sense of ease, gratitude, appreciation, peace, and prayer. We are restful when ordinary life is enough. You call that, right? We are restful when ordinary life is enough. Hey, here's a crazy stat for you. A $38 billion business is storage units in the United States. AKA, we have this insatiable desire for more. In fact, we're getting so much more that we need places to store our more. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a natural tendency within our culture that we drive for more, and that's in every arena of life, whether physically in possessions, whether it be within relationships, whether it be in just what we see that we got to have and add to, what we see as the ideal life. And so my kids got to be that way, and they got to be involved in those activities, and if somehow they're not, then somehow we missed. And here's what we're doing in this series is we're just trying to slow down and eliminate and go, what are healthy rhythms? And by healthy rhythms, we mean this, maybe in Ronald's language, is just how do we be restful in ordinary life? How do you be satisfied with the life that God has given you? Is there a way that we can do that? Jesus being our model in Mark chapter 2, and again, this week we're kind of building a case, so we're going to jump kind of all over when we're talking about the rhythm we're about to dive into. But we're going to build a case, if you like, for this thing called Sabbath and what Sabbath is. And for Jesus, there's this rhythm where you catch him, and it over and over again, it relates that what he's doing is on this day, and this day was the Sabbath. And so in Mark chapter 2, in verse 23, it says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees, who were the religious leaders, said to him, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? He answered, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar, the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath, catch this, the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. The idea that Jesus plays out is there's this thing called the Sabbath, and the Sabbath was made for people. What he's saying in that is in this climate that he finds himself, they'd actually leaned into the second part of that. That they began to believe that people, instead of the Sabbath being made for people were actually made to serve the Sabbath. What do I mean by that? These religious leaders, they had made 613 laws out of 10. They had made all these laws and built up this whole case that if you were going to be godly, then this is what you were going to do. And a lot of those had to do around this day they called the Sabbath. The Sabbath, in their context, was a specific day when you were not allowed, and they had specific laws that you could not do. And so in this case, they come along to Jesus, who is with his companions, super important. He's in relationship on his Sabbath. And in relationship, as he goes along, they pick some grain. And now they're called out by the religious leaders. Oh, foul, right? Super Bowl Sunday flag, right? And so they call foul, and they go, why are they doing that? And Jesus comes out with this statement, and what he's saying in this statement is you've reversed the order. And I want to be really clear today, because this can get weird. When we start talking Sabbath, when we start talking this rhythm, it can get really weird because you can easily become religious about it. And what I mean by religious is you make it a law. And if you keep it and they don't, we're good, they're bad. That is not what this is about. This is about reclaiming some of the restfulness we need to be present and be satisfied with ordinary life. What Sabbath does is, what Jesus says is, hey, Sabbath was made for people. Sabbath is a gift. It is a gift to humanity. This shouldn't be something that is weighty and makes you feel overwhelmed. He's saying it's a gift. Now, the word Sabbath in the original, in the Hebrew, is Shabbat. And Shabbat means to stop, or can also be translated to delight. So when you think of Sabbath, when you think of a day that you are going to stop and delight. Stop and delight. What do we mean by stop? Stop working. Oh, John, you don't understand, my friend. If I stop, who's going to do da 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 da? Oh, I could never do that, because if I stop, you catch what we did in that language, right? We just made the world revolve around what? What we produce. We just made the world about, if I don't do what I do, I won't get ahead. Maybe we're getting ahead at the expense of our own souls. And what Jesus is saying, there's this thing called Sabbath that is a gift. And it's when you stop and you delight. Now, Sabbath has a history. And so we're going to go through, like, if you didn't like history in school, just hang in. This is cool history, okay? So, but Sabbath has a history and a specific context that it comes out of. If you turn to Exodus chapter 16, we get the first mention of Sabbath. And in Exodus 16, there's a nation called Israel. They've been rescued by God from slavery. They've been rescued by God, and now they're in the wilderness. The statistic we do have is there's some 600,000 men, and then that wasn't even counting women and children. So you can add it up. There may be 2 million people in the desert, in tents, that Jesus has brought out from slavery. They're on the run. Jesus is leading them. And so he's like, 2 million people got to eat food. They were human, right? And so in that context, Jesus begins to provide for, or God begins to provide for them. And as God begins to provide, he gives them some parameters. If you look down at verse 21, it says, each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed. And when the sun grew hot, it melted away. What are we talking about? We're talking about Frosted Flakes. You like Frosted Flakes? That's what we're talking about. Like every day there were Frosted Flakes, and they were told, go gather your Frosted Flakes, right? And so they would go out and they would gather what they needed, but God put a very specific stipulation on it that, hey, you can't keep this over to the next day. This is a daily provision that I'm giving to you. Except on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of what? Sabbath rest. You are to stop and you are to delight. You are to stop from your work. What was their work? Their work was going outside, picking up Frosted Flakes. That was their work. He goes, you're not going to do it on this day. You need to stop. You need to have a Sabbath rest. A holy Sabbath to the Lord, holy being set apart. You are setting this day apart. You are stopping to set it apart to God. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning. So they saved it until morning as Moses had commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it like it had before when they tried. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is a Sabbath day to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. There's this crazy rhythm that we begin to pick up on. If you turn over just a couple of pages, or click a couple of buttons, depending on what you're doing, to chapter 20, we get what we know as the 10 Commandments, right? And the 10 Commandments have, like in our culture, the cultural context, get a really bad rap. Because they get put forward as this thing of, oh, there's a list of rules. that if you're gonna be a Christian, you better follow those list of rules. Okay, can we back up a second and put them in context? Because context is there's this whole group of people, 2 million people, that have been rescued from slavery who do not know how to live as free people. They have been born into slavery, they've lived in slavery, and now they're free and can do whatever they want. And God goes, okay, let's put some parameters on this, and let's give some rules, if you like, some suggestions, if you like, some commands. And in those commands, what he's actually doing is going, hey, what I want from you is I want you to live the life that I've always intended. I want you to live the best possible life as a human. I want you to have the best human experience. And he says one of the best ways to do that is don't kill each other, right? Don't steal from each other. Hey, don't lust after your neighbor's wife. It's not gonna go well for you, right? There's certain things that he puts in here that he goes, hey, don't have a God, any other God other than me. Like, because you'd be settling for something that isn't even a God. You'd be settling for less. So he puts some stuff in here, and all he's doing is God is shaping them and going, hey, if you wanna live the best human life possible, the way I intended it, this is the best way to do that. One of them is this, in verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son, or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days, catch this, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. He set it apart. Wait. He's teaching humans the best way to be human. And he goes, hey, the best way to be human is for you to actually have a 6-in-1 rhythm in your life. What do I mean by 6-in-1? There's 6 days you work, 1 day. By the way, if you're questioning this, humans, take a look at creation. Because within creation, and we won't look at that verse for time's sake, but in creation, in Genesis, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, you get a very specific view of God who on the seventh day rested from all of his creating. Okay, mind-blowing moment. God has boundless energy. God has endless time. God put himself for that moment inside of our time and space to give us a model that we could step into and go, if it's good enough for God, it's good enough for me. That God would take time, think about it for a second, that God would take time in creation going, humanity is going to need this. They are going to need this rhythm or else they're going to go crazy because they can't stop. Then he goes, hey, the best way to be human is you need this 6-in-1 rhythm. There's another connection that's made in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And in Deuteronomy chapter 5, it's Moses re-giving the law, re-giving the best way to be human to an entirely new generation. This generation wasn't a part of the ones that came out. This was a generation that was going to carry it forward. And now he sits with that generation and he goes, hey, I'm going to give you what God gave me. That if you're going to live the best life that God intended with God, this is what you need to do. And he says this, verse 12, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. As the Lord your God has commanded you, 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall neither do any work, you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, any of your animals. It sounds familiar, right? Nor any foreigner residing in your town, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. But here's the change. You ready? Verse 15. remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So the first time he goes, hey, it's based on, look back at creation, God set this rhythm in motion of rest. But then he gets to this point and he's speaking with this generation and he goes, hey, remember you were slaves. Why is that significant? Because think about a slave, and especially in this context, they were creating bricks because they were building for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians. They didn't choose when they went to sleep. They didn't choose when they woke up. They didn't choose how many bricks they made. They were just told, you will make bricks. We have the means to force you into labor. You are gonna do what we want. So guess what? 7 days a week, what do they do? Made bricks, made bricks, made bricks, made bricks, made bricks, made bricks, made bricks. Your value was placed on how many bricks you produced. Your value was by what you produced. If you've been around church at all of a sudden dots start to connect. Your value to Almighty God is not by what you produce, it's who you are. What Sabbath does in this context for those Israelites is it's a day when they remember who they are. They remember that their value doesn't come by what they do or what they produce. You ever meet somebody and go, hey, who are you? And we instantly go into what we do to define who we are. I personally think it's the most awkward conversation. I hate it because people have stereotypes of pastors. So I avoid it like the plague. What do you do? I talk a little bit. I'll lead a couple of teams. I hang out with people, right? But we have a way of identifying ourselves by what we do. And what we do is we actually give value to ourselves by what we do. And what Jesus is, or what God's reminding them in this moment is he's reminding the nation of Israel, he's bringing them back and going, hey, your value isn't found in what you do. Your value is found in who you are. Who are you? You are free people because I set you free. It's this beautiful moment. And so if you jump backwards now to where we were at the start of this, where Jesus goes, hey, Sabbath is a gift. What are we talking about? John, what are you talking about? I can't even connect all the dots. Sabbath's a gift. It wasn't a gift just for a group of people that were back here. Do you know that zoo animals, that if they're on display more than 6 days, start to go crazy? Do you know that in the fabric and nature of creation, there's a 6-in-1 rhythm? Do you know that your soul has a 6-in-1 rhythm? You were created with it. That if you take 7 days and all you do, and I don't mean like some of you go, well, I take a day off. Yeah, you work harder at home than you do at your job because you got more jobs waiting at home than you do actually at your job. That's not what we're talking about with rest. We're talking about stopping and delighting. Okay, let's use different words. Resting and worship. Now all of a sudden you went with worship, you went, so what? I'm gonna do nothing all day and walk around the house singing Hillsong? Well, if that's your view of worship, then yes. But you realize worship is anything where we magnify God more. You realize worship is the entire spectrum of your life, not just singing. Singing is a part of worship. You realize that you can sit on your porch with a really good burrito and actually worship in that moment. You realize you can sit by a window in your house with a cup of coffee or whatever your beverage of choice is and just be fully present and remind yourself of how much God has blessed you. You see, something happens to your soul. I've been trying to catch this rhythm in my own life lately. You guys, the chemicals in my brain changed when I put my phone away for an entire day. Like, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. The chemicals, the pressure, the stress, the whatever's going on inside of here. I put my phone away and I go, I'm not gonna check it for 24 hours. There were moments where I was like, oh, I should go. Oh, I don't have my phone. Do you know that by like hour 12, the chemicals in my brain started to slow down? The hours took longer. It was this beautiful moment where I was sitting there, I was fully present doing something, and I'm like, how long is this? Because I was no longer distracted, I was fully present. You guys, the best definition, I don't know what your Christmas is like, but I don't mean the weird part with relatives that you don't like and you fight and all that. I don't mean that. I mean the beautiful moments where it's just you, your family, and you slow down. That part of Christmas. The best definition I heard of Sabbath was, it's like Christmas once a week, only the good part of Christmas. What would your life be like if once a week you caught this rhythm where you go, God, I'm gonna trust you more than I trust myself, because that's what this is really about. God, I'm gonna be fully present with the people I love. My favorite part is I actually engage fully in conversations on that day. One of my favorite parts is waking up without an alarm clock on that day. Try that one on. I'm the guy that has an alarm every single day of my life until that day when my phone went away, and I'm like, I don't know. When I wake up, I wake up. Some of you are like, oh, I could never do that. I don't have time for that. We're getting somewhere. You see, here's the thing. If you're always on and it's always in your hands, then you're never going to just rest and trust God. And so Sabbath is this. It's this beautiful moment where we remind ourselves that we're free. Every single time I've done this rhythm of Sabbath, it's impossible to not be aware that God has my life in his hands. I don't know about you, but I had an amazing moment this past week where I realized how limited we are as human beings. And it was a helicopter crash last weekend, where all of a sudden somebody I'd grown up watching, all of a sudden somebody who is larger than life is gone in a moment. And all of a sudden it was like, life is that short. Life is that short. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to miss it because all I'm doing is I'm busy on my phone, or I'm busy with that, or I'm busy with work, or I'm busy with something else. I don't want it because God didn't call us to that. And so this week, would you consider, is there a day, and for us it begins Friday night, and that's intentional because then I can get stuff done Friday and I can get it all out of my brain. Friday night to Saturday night, that's when we've just chose that it works in our week. I do something on Sunday, so Sunday doesn't work. But is there a day of your week? And I don't mean like you have a day off so you just work more at home. I mean a day off where you go, we are going to stop and delight today. We're going to stop and we're going to worship today. We're just going to find beauty in God in all shapes, spaces, ways. I can tell you one of my favorites that have happened so far was the beauty I found in playing Legos with my two little ones. It was unreal. I haven't stopped long enough to do that for a while, like truly be present for a good hour and a half. We built some cool Legos, by the way. But would you consider this week going, hey, I'm gonna build this rhythm in and see what it's like. See if John's really, and it might be hard. You may go crazy. And that's just an indicator that you need it more than you thought. One last verse, and then we're gonna dive into communion this morning. But the verse is taken out of Galatians, and I'm just gonna read it off screen. Galatians 5:1 says this: it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. This is talking about the law. In this context, I would say for us, this is talking about getting caught up in a world where you don't get to say your yeses and you don't get to say your nos. We need to remind ourselves this morning that Jesus has bought our freedom. You are free today. You are free today. And so if you're helping with communion, you can come on forward and we'll begin to pass it out. And as they're doing that, I just want to encourage you, because we're going to give you a little bit of time just to process this with the Lord today, with God today. And I would say this, that Then in what ways that as you hold what in your hand representation of Jesus' body and Jesus' blood, which all that is just a picture and a reminder that he showed up on the planet and he died for you. Why? Like Galatians says, that you would find freedom, And so maybe today, as you hold the elements, it's a little different conversation with God. It's, God, what are the ways that I'm trying to be God and not letting you be God? What are the ways that I'm trusting what I produce? I'm trusting what I produce to give me value instead of trusting who you say I am to be my value. That as you hold the elements this morning, it's just a simple conversation of, God, in what way am I struggling to slow down? God, in what way am I struggling to live the life you created of this 6-in-1 rhythm? Crazy statistic for you. There's a group of people called Seventh-day Adventists, and they have done a study on them. And what the Seventh-day Adventists are all about is Sabbath. They're religious about it. And I'm not jumping on a bandwagon or whatever, I just want to give you this. The study showed that the average Seventh-day Adventist lives 10 years longer. You add up the average lifespan, taking a day a week to stop and delight, and it comes out to 10 years. Maybe the conversation you're having with God right now about how you slow down and how you delight actually will prolong your life literally as well as spiritually. So the next moments are yours. You can sit and you can spend time with the Lord, and then we'll take it all together in a moment. It is for freedom that you have been set free in the person of Jesus Christ. And on the night when he was going to be betrayed, he got his friends together to remind them of the freedom that was coming when he got to the cross. And he took bread and he broke the bread and he handed it to them. And what he said is very specific. It's a reminder. Remember who you are and how you got there. And so in giving the bread, it was a reminder that he physically showed up and he set them free. And he said, take, eat, do this in remembrance of me. He may partake of the bread. And in the same language, he took a cup and he said, remember, this is a new covenant, right? This is new. This means that where we talk about the Israelites, they had to. It was part of the law that they had to keep. We sit under a new covenant in freedom, in grace. You don't have to do it. But what God has handed you is a gift to remind yourselves that you've been set free, that your life would be one of worship and delight, of rest and being present, of love and of joy. And he said, the way that's going to happen is through the shedding of my blood. So he took the cup, he gave it to them. He said, take, drink, do this in remembrance of me. So God, we come before you this morning. We're your family. We are the children of God. We celebrate you. Thank you for freedom today. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for rescue. Thank you for saving us. And everybody said, amen.